Well, we're going to talk about health and temperance again, your favorite subject. And I realize that month after month when I come up here, sometimes I get a little bit heavy and forceful in my speeches, but I want you to know this morning I'm going to keep it light and airy. It's a play on words because the subject for today is air. And that's one of the 8 natural remedies. So we keep it airy. You know, years ago we used to have a lady that came to church here, was a member. You can't hear me? Hey, could we have a mic up here? Oh, so those other folks you don't want to hear. That's it. Okay. Well, they're nice people. So anyway, this lady came here, and she was a lot of fun. I know my wife will know who it is whenever I mention this story, but we were at a group camp out sort of thing up in Ocala National Forest. A church group went up there and was singing and nature walking and that sort of thing one day. And she pointed out my lovely gray hair and says, "Well, how come your hair's so gray?" And being a scientist, you know, I got to get in there and tell her the whole thing. So I said, well, it's when you get to a certain age, you know, genetically some people, their hair follicles begin to let air into the hair shaft, and the air goes up through the hair shaft and makes the color of the hair appear gray. And she says, "Oh." And from then on, she called me Airhead. But I liked Kathy. Patty. She was great. You know, air, we can't survive too good without it. We can go for weeks without food and days without water, but only minutes without air. When I was young, I grew up on a lake north of Tampa, and when I was about 3 years old when I moved out there, and I had to quickly learn to swim because I had 2 sisters and a brother older than me, and they could all swim, and I couldn't. But I couldn't quite master getting on top of the water, but I learned to hold my breath a long time underwater. And I used to, years later, amaze my wife when she was in the Lamaze class with a couple of our kids, and I could hold my breath for 3 minutes easily. And most people can't, but I developed my lungs at an early age. That's why I talk so loud. Yeah, so I learned to go for 3 minutes, and you know what happens in about 10 minutes if you go without air, which is really oxygen, you'll die. You'll go brain dead, and it's very damaging. But, you know, we can't survive very long without air, but Ellen White told us in Review and Herald in 1900, that prayer is the breath of the soul. So there's an analogy of air to breath. And if we can't go for 3 minutes without, or 10 minutes before we go brain dead without air, how long do we become spiritually dead if we don't pray? Probably pretty quick. So we should be always in an attitude of prayer. Now, actually, it's oxygen that we're concerned about when we're talking about air. And it's an amazing element. It exists naturally in the atmosphere as a diatomic molecule of O2. It can exist as a single molecule of oxygen, or even as 3 oxygen atoms together in the form of ozone, which is created up in our upper atmosphere by ultraviolet radiation. Now, we use oxygen in metabolism for the human body, as you all know, and although it's a lot more complicated, it's analogous to the combustion in fire. When you have fuel and you put oxygen with it, it burns. We all know that. But it also can be destructive. Now, we even take various supplements and certain foods that are antioxidants to try to eliminate some of the things that oxygen does in our bodies. For instance, you know, of course, that there's oxygen in our blood, in the arteries, which is what makes it red. But there's none in the veins. That's why it's kind of a bluish-purple color. So what does that do? The oxygen actually does damage in the arteries, and that's why we have what everybody calls bad cholesterol, which goes around. It's like a spackling compound that patches up the holes in the arteries caused by the oxygen. So we need the oxygen to live, but yet we don't want the damage that it can cause. So the body takes care of it. God designed it perfectly. Now, when you say there's good cholesterol and bad cholesterol, I don't think God made anything bad. The only bad cholesterol is the kind that comes from animals rather than plants. because it wasn't meant to be in our body, patching up the holes that the oxygen makes. And all it does is make plaque build up, and we have heart attacks. You know, in the 1930s, a guy by the name of Otto Warburg got a Nobel Prize in medicine for proving that cancer cells cannot live in an oxygen-rich environment. So if we're getting plenty of oxygen, we won't have cancer. Isn't that nice? Simple things like that. It also is known to kill germs. How many of you use peroxide? Or even ozone is used as a treatment for sick people. In fact, when there was a tuberculosis epidemic back in the early 1900s, the cure for it was found to be put people outside in the sunlight and fresh air, and they eventually got cured. Simple things like that. Now, in our atmosphere, it consists generally of 21% oxygen out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. In our large cities, it drops down to about 10%, less than half the oxygen level that you'd find out on the ocean. You didn't know that, did you? It's not good to live in a city. And it's even less enclosed buildings, and we all live in those with our air conditions and everything. We're down to less than 10% of the air is oxygen. But take heart, there's other things in the air that we've made up for it. Out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean again, there's 15,000 pollution particles per cubic inch. 15,000, that's out in the Pacific. But in our large cities, there's 5 million polluting particles per cubic inch. That's 300 times the amount of pollution in the cities as there is out in the middle of the ocean. My. Then we got our homes and our office and our cars. They all have pollutants in them, such as carpet, insulation, cleaning chemicals, cooking byproducts, and then smoking. You know, I hope no one here smokes or is suffering with that plague, because I know what it's like. I did it for 30-some years. And used to tell myself, I can't imagine why a guy as smart as you think you are could have smoked for all those years, but I did. I've found the statistic that 60% of us in the United States live in sub-1970 Clear Air Standard Act environments. In other words, we got a law that says your air quality has to be such a level, but only 60% of us live in that good of an air quality. Now you can do something about it. You've got air purification you could do. You can get first, if you smoke, don't. And anybody you know that does, don't. And anybody that lives with you, to ask them not to do it in your house. So that's a pollutant that you're taking in all the time. One of the best things you can do is move to the country. And a lot of us live out here in a country environment, and that's good. But if you can't live in the country or you're in the city, you need to find some areas like parks that have trees that you can go and be among and breathe there for a while. It does wonders for your body. We can get air filters or ionizers, and ionizers make these ozone particles too that are good for cleaning your air. They ionize the dust and other pollutants in the air and cause them to be heavy, and gravity pulls them out of the air. So it's a nice plan. One of the best things you can do is get some indoor plants. They not only filter the air like spider plants do, but they also provide oxygen. Now there's a lot of healing properties with air. I read from Councils on Health, page 55, fresh air will prove far more beneficial to sick persons than medicine, and is far more essential to them than their food. So remember that next time you're sick. Breathing is better than eating. And it's certainly better than medicines. She says also that physicians and nurses should encourage their patients to be much in the open air. Outdoor life is the only remedy that many invalids need. Now read that again. Outdoor life is the only remedy that many invalids need. It has a wonderful power to heal diseases caused by the excitements and excess of fashionable life. Boy, you should see life today in this country, huh? Talk about excitements and excesses of fashionable life. A life that weakens and destroys the power of body, mind, and soul. And the cure is outdoor life. She says in Ministry of Healing, page 145, these next two quotes should give you some comfort. They do me. To invalids weary of city life, with its glare of bright lights and noise of the streets, how soothing and healing are the quiet and freedom of the country. How eagerly do they turn to the scenes of nature. How glad they would be to sit in the open air and rejoice in the sunlight and breathe the fragrance of tree and flower. There are life-giving properties in the balsam of the pine and the fragrance of the cedar and fir. Other trees also have properties that are health restoring. Do you know you could go into a pine forest or a pine grove and sit there for an afternoon and cure yourself of some disease or other? Is that kind of amazing? That's like free health care. Such a concept. To the chronic invalid, nothing so tends to restore health and happiness as living amid attractive country surroundings. Here are the most go ahead and get it, it might be important. Here the most helpless can sit and lie in the sunshine or in the shade of trees. They only have to lift their eyes to see beautiful foliage. The sweet sense of restfulness and refreshing comes over them as they listen to the murmuring of the breezes. The drooping spirits revive, the waning strength is recruited. Unconsciously, the mind becomes peaceful, the fevered pulse more calm and regular. That sure sounds like a good prescription to me. Something that not only cures you, but makes you peaceful and restful and draws you closer to God. So I recommend getting out in the country. Thank you.